The Keir Starmer fallout after his immigration speech is still going on, and I wanted to cover it again because there's a whole new dimension that's been uncovered today, which I think is absolutely huge with regards to the future of Britain, Europe and the Western world, and how we understand our tradition and the changing nature of our countries due to mass immigration. Now, to be clear, from the top, I've explored it before, we all know Keir Starmer is playing politics here. He's noticed that Reform are taking too many votes from Labour heartlands and is trying to win back some of those Labour voters, as well as a few centrist dads. Now, he does risk alienating the left with his rhetoric. However, this is all very Tony Blair in style. I mean, he would move to the centre and even the centre-right and would just bank on the left holding. And it tended to, quite broadly. Whether it will today and whether it will under someone like Starmer remains to be seen, but it seems to be that's his strategy. But more importantly, I'm wondering if he's made a bigger meta misstep behind all of this. You know, Starmer and whoever's behind him pulling the strings are so focused on winning elections and being competent political operators instead of having any actual beliefs rooted in anything real, that I do wonder if they've trodden on a landmine here. And I got thinking this when I saw this post from Stephen Edgington. You may have heard of him before. He's a journalist on GB News. He's quite good, actually. He's the fellow who interviewed Farage a while back and got some good answers out of him. But he's stated this: has Enoch Powell won the argument? Now, I think this is something of a rhetorical question. The answer is yes, and I think it always has been amongst the indigenous British people. Even at the time of his speech, he was extremely popular. But it was the burgeoning Liberal regime coming in and he had to go. I dare say more people now would look back and if they look at him fairly would say, okay, he was warning about something very genuine. If he didn't use language that was friendly to the Liberals, that may be one thing. But he certainly had a point. And that's why since Keir Starmer's speech, he's been likened to Powell. All of the typical Liberal types, the mainstream Liberal media, have all come out with the cliches. You know, Britain was built by immigrants, which is so dehumanising to us that. An awful thing to say. It's extremely disrespectful, not to mention ahistorical. But I thought one of the most interesting meltdowns we saw from our Liberal friends was from Kevin Maguire. I think he's a far lefty type, used to be a journalist of some sort. But anyway, here he is on morning television.
Because Enoch Powell, the racist Tory in the late 60s,
1968.
His infamous Rivers of Blood speech talked about people feeling like strangers in their country. He meant white people strangers in their country. And it's kind of sickening now.
Why is it sickening for white people to say that they feel like strangers in their own country? I mean, do you think Kevin would say the same if some black folks said, we want white folks out of our country? No, he'd be like, yeah, get the hell out, you pale-skinned bigots.
Either he's got some young, naive person down the street, or he's got somebody who has gone where they should never have tripped. He's off his moral molehill. Now when he wants to accuse the Conservative Party or Reform of racism and bigotry, they will be able to turn around and say, what about you?
Yeah, not sure that's really going to matter, Kev, outside the Liberal bubbles of London. But what I really want to focus on here is how Kevin Maguire engages in the classic Liberal propaganda line. Enoch Powell is a monster, a terrible person, according to him. And that's what's really at the crux of all of this. What Maguire is engaging in here is what I often call progressive moral theology. The idea being that if you critique mass immigration or multiculturalism, you're not just wrong, you don't just have a different opinion, you're morally repugnant, you're indefensible. Now remember, in our post-World War II liberal narrative, our secular world, there is no God, there is no Satan, but there is Hitler, and Hitler plays the Satan and the progressive plays the God, Christ-like figure. Now, when we factor in Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech, he referenced a racialised narrative. One of his constituents had said they were worried that the black man would have the whip hand over the white man. Now, of course, in the liberal conception, this means that Powell has entered on a path which isn't just wrong, it's morally repugnant on a fundamental biblical level. Now, we don't believe in spells in this day and age, but if someone is to utter the words Enoch Powell in the liberal mainstream, it's essentially an incantation which states we're moving into great darkness and we need to bring all the powers of light in order to conquer this. And what I'm getting at here isn't just the question, was Enoch Powell right about immigration, but were we right in our liberal mythological conception of who and what Powell is? That's the real question for our era. Now, we know who Powell is in the liberal mythological conception, acolyte of Hitler/Satan, but let's take away all the mythology and look at some brute facts about the man. Enoch Powell was born in Birmingham to humble origins. His father was a primary school teacher. However, he did gain a scholarship because he showed excessive intelligence and ended up studying classics at Trinity College, Cambridge, where he earned a double first. He then, at the age of 25, was appointed Professor of Greek at the University of Sydney in Australia, becoming one of the youngest classics professors in the whole of the British Empire. So I think it's fair to say that Enoch Powell was an intelligent man, to put it mildly, a precocious child, a self-starter, and someone who achieved a lot in the world of scholarship. But intelligence doesn't necessarily map onto morality, so what else can we learn about the man? Well, perhaps most famously, he served his nation dutifully in the Second World War against the Nazis. Let's not tell Kevin Maguire about that.
Does Enoch Powell, the racist Tory...
I love how he emphasises the Tory on that, because, the Tories, they're really racist. I mean, here's Rishi Sunak, look at him with his diversity built Britain coin. But as well as being a decorated soldier, he did achieve an MBE for his efforts in the war. He was also an accomplished poet, a polyglot, he spoke 7 languages, and famously a politician where he was financial secretary to the Treasury and the Minister of Health. Not a bad resume, is it? But morally speaking, we could draw from that he certainly possessed bravery for his actions in the war. We could see that he was culturally curious, given he was a specialist in classics and spoke 7 languages. And on top of that, we could also draw that he had a sense of civil duty, given he became a politician and was more than willing to lose his role to say what he thought was right. How many top-level politicians would do that in this day and age? But I think what's really interesting about Powell's morality is that he was a committed Christian. He was an Anglican. If you read his conversion story, it's actually very moving and interesting. And I think this is especially important given Powell's reputation. To the left and the liberal establishment of today, Powell was supposedly, despite them all being secular, betraying those roots as, it's Christian to welcome all of the people from the world, and it's anti-Christian to wish to have homogeneity of your people and nation. And this view is actually shared by sizable sections of the modern hard right. They would focus on Christianity's message of universal love and see that as undermining to the integrity of a nation. But given Powell had, quote, right-wing views on immigration, as well as being a devout Christian, could it be that it wasn't him who was mixed up, but actually us? But could it be that Powell adhered to a more traditional understanding of Christianity that was rooted in love and compassion for others, yes, but also focused heavily on duty, discipline, national sovereignty, hierarchy, and order? And this gets to a core theme I speak about a lot on this channel. In modernity, we deny that more orderly side of Christianity. It's more masculine, so we see it as evil, as controlling and constraining. Now, it very much can be those things when it's in a state of sin, but its true state is in love, where it's part of the balance between the masculine and feminine. So by all means, we need to have the compassion, but if all you have is that alone, what you'll do is just say we need to have mass immigration into our countries all the time because you should love your neighbour, right? Now, because our tradition's been largely destroyed in Britain and the wider Western world, we don't have the authoritative masculine voice to pipe up and say, no, this is where we need a boundary, and to bring balance back to our culture, our civilization, our tradition, and our people. Because of this, the actual worldview of someone like an Enoch Powell must be ignored, and it must be mythologized to fit into the liberal narrative. We are loving and kind, he is hateful and evil. And worse still, we can see that's created a dynamic in modernity in our political system, which even people in the right will play into. What I'm referring to here are the types who realise the liberal system is corrupt and not working in their favour, so they become its enemy. But because they have no historic tradition to balance their hearts, mind and souls, to bring them to a place of peace and wisdom in order to deal with this, they become angry and hateful towards the system, exactly what it wants them to be. The liberal system wants people like Combo in the movie This Is England, played by Stephen Graham. You probably remember him from Adolescence, which is another piece of propaganda against a traditional worldview. The liberal system decries people like this, but they actually want them because they can say, I bet these guys would love Enoch Powell's swastika on their forehead, full of violence, beating up black people for no reason. These people are just evil monsters, demons, and we're the good people here to fight them. And if the liberal regime can push people down this path and make out that anybody who might sympathise with the worldview of Enoch Powell is just as bad, just wants to attack people with a different skin tone for no reason, then they can maintain their control, because let's be honest, most people don't want to be psychotic nutcases. But if we're to go back to Powell's worldview and strip away all of the modern propaganda, we can have a crack at answering the criticism from the left, the liberal mainstream, and elements of the hard right as well, with regards to how could he be a Christian but also be pro-borders. Now this is a massive question, whether you're Christian or not, because it's at the very heart of our moral system, which underpins our tradition, which underpins how we think about our civilization. And I think the answer goes something like this. When Christians refer to universal love, it means we're all one in God. That means we're all in His being. In secular terms, that would be saying something like we're all part of life. In essence, while we may seem like individuals, our animating force comes from God Himself, or let's just say life, if you prefer secular language. It's why G.K. Chesterton looked out on the world and saw the million masks of God, i.e. the energy of God is in every single one of us. Now this is where Christian ideas of brotherly love come from, of loving your neighbour, of being kind to the stranger. You recognise he has a divine worth and that God is in him. Now this has been a fundamental part of Christianity since Christ preached the gospel. However, what happened in modernity is we had a shift away from the spiritual dimension. It wasn't rational to the modern mind, so we thought we don't need this anymore. But they wanted to keep the ideas of universal equality, and what they did is they placed them on the physical plane. This meant that we misunderstood the true nature of equality, which is in the spirit. We're all one in God. When it comes to manifest physical reality, we are, of course, different. And this is where the modern ideas come from, that there are no differences between men and women. And we're supposed to all believe that, even though there obviously are. Yet if we hold to this worldview, which we're now trapped in as a civilization, there can be no differences between things, people, and genders. And it means that what's the problem with mass immigration and multiculturalism? None of this stuff matters anyway. Don't you know that? And ironically, despite the liberal globalists promoting ideas such as diversity is our strength, what they're really doing is destroying real diversity by destroying the integrity of our nations. They're turning us all into one homogenized mush of humanity in a rootless economic zone. These are vital lessons we must relearn if we're to stand a chance in Western culture for our tradition to reawaken. I believe Powell knew these lessons very deeply. He wasn't fueled by hate, quite the opposite. He loved his country and wanted to maintain its integrity into the future and could see what was coming. And this is why the liberal system must lie about Enoch Powell. It either doesn't understand him or doesn't want to understand him because his worldview could undermine theirs. As Enoch Powell himself stated, have you ever wondered perhaps why opinions which the majority of people quite naturally hold are, if anyone dares express them publicly, denounced as controversial, extremist, explosive, disgraceful, and overwhelmed with a violence and venom quite unknown to debate on mere political issues? It is because the whole power of the aggressor depends upon preventing people from seeing what is happening and from saying what they see. He seems to me to be a wise and prescient man. These are my thoughts, however, let me know what you think down below. If you're interested in aligning more with our tradition and understanding more about spirituality, do check out my channel, The Sacred Way, down below. It's all about spiritual and personal transformation. Other than that, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and enjoy the rest of your day.